Moro moro ti kweriwe ngaunare usehe qaba. Aure ada kweni ti tkhwa in okwa. Ikhabehe ti dumiqi. Ka qhuse qamap unha in. Kama nghi ka heb. Ta hui huwa dumu kharuq amab. Morning, my people listening to me during this morning. I want all people to use their brains, perhaps like in this manner. That could or might bring them to or near to the truth or through to the truth in that sense. This morning, I am going to literally start off to integrating about or talking about who Xirikuana are, and I'm going to give a definition as to where are they emerging from, and then the false notions that we are always fed by white historians, giving them a definition about who they are. And in this current moment, I'm going to give a definition as to they have maintained the status quo of your colonialism in the past, especially post-British settlement. And so it's still what they represent and the false notion today. And I want to give a definition and give the whole outlook, the paradigm that Griqua people are not indigent, they are not Kwe. Griqua people still maintain status quo of what their ancestors have brought to what we have witnessed. You understand? In Kora we say witnessing, that we are witnessing what they have also have brought into the scale. The definition of Griqua, it means little white children or white surrogates. That's what the name Xirikuana means. Khiri from Khati. Khati means white. So a white man is Khati Kwe because they're white. You understand? So they are children of white men. So that's why they're referred as Xirikwa. You understand? Xirikuana, actually the correct definition is Xirikuana. Khiri means white, and then Wana, it means children. So that's why I say white surrogates. This is the definition. Xirikuana. You understand? Meaning Xirikuana or Xirikuana. That's how the definition it is, how it folds. And I want to give a imperative explanation as to where does it derive from. These people were never a clan. Intention, it was never, there was no federation of what, I would say a federation, but not, I would never say they were never a nation that was actually referred to as Griqua. And there's one thing I need to stress about in terms of family names and certain surnames attached to what is Griqua in the past. And then we are going to begin as to where does this form of identity, as we find to be exclusively being a vivid identity, and where does it actually emerge from. The Griqua never existed as a nation. There was never a nation called Griqua or tribe called Griqua. In fact, just to go beyond 1800s, right? The interbred between or hybrid between a Darakwede and a Darakwede, between Darakwede and our with your white, actually your Kulkana particularly, there was a difference. And when they had children, especially your missionaries, when they arrived here, those children were referred to as Khiriks. And particularly these Darakwede, make an example. These were children who were brought up by missionaries who were abducted to come and work for missionaries in the past. So all these reverends, all these people were working for missionaries. They'd never brought wives. So in particular, they had children with a queer woman who were working for missionary stations, and then children were, as a result, they came through. And particularly as well, white men who were at that time, they came through as well. And we'll make an example with the for trekkers as well. They never brought wives, and then particularly they created a state where they met indigenous women and then they had children with them as well. These children are referred to as khiri, but in a manner that these children were never part of any nation or whatever, but a descriptiveness between what we have as particularly in a narrative that we can say these people were never a nation of a sort. Now the British settlers arrived, and particularly there were more men than women when they arrived here. British men arrived, British settlers arrived, and particularly were more men than women. Women were there, they brought women, but particularly more were men. And these men as well, as a result, they brought their own, they brought their own, they brought their own, would say they brought the state of conditions in which they were invading land, and they were also pursuing to invade land. And by pursuing to invade land in the era of your 1800, especially 18 settler arrival in the south, in what we know as your Cape Colony, then when they arrived, this is where Griqua people emerged. You understand? People who were referred to as Griqua. Now, missionaries, as I've mentioned, they created this notion, and these people were slave raiders, right? And if you look into particularly the son and the family that were actually into this core uh, uh, um, aspect of what we know as Griqua, the Fleurs, make an example in the past. These people were white, were your French Protestant of origin actually, and they came in, and then they also in that state of mind, and there were those who defied to live with amongst the French, your French Huguenots actually that were brought here, and but I prefer them as French Protestants because they came here without children. I mean, without women and children. They came here as men because of rich societies that have sent them to come and establish themselves to have land in a foreign land as well. So coming to the Leflers as well, these people are never indigent. These people, they maintained legacy because the Lefler surname, it's not found in any indigent legacy, but it's a French, uh, it's a Protestant, actually, a French Protestant legacy, and it still exists even from where it originates from. So the same people, they've maintained that they were not Kwe in the past because we had documents. And these people were working all closely in a narrative that the group that we know as Griqua, it was comprised with slavers, a group of men that were slavers, and this group of men, they were recruiting slaves, and from as far as north and east of Free State, west of Transvaal as well, in the entire Cape Colony in the past, they were slave raiders. And then there's an obscurity when it comes to when you read into their history, and then you find a lot of falseness that is attached with them and attached with other groups of indigenous people in a sort. And I want to also, that whitewash actually is trying to dissipate all the tracks that what these people that are referred to as Griqua, what they were up to in the past. In the past, to make an example, these people, they used to recruit slaves, particularly. And when they recruited slaves, they used to go to indigenous slaves, especially to weaker indigenous tribes. And they would go there, and they would recruit them to go work in farms, particularly. And then because to stronger non-Kwe phenomenon in the past, Griqua would recruit them, and they would sell them outside, even though they would also take Kwe, um, a force of men, particularly, they would sell them outside of the country, especially going to what is the Lagua Bay, former Lorenzo Marx in the past, what is present Maputo, and then also what is present Cape Town today. So I want to give a narrative that these people were slavers. they were doing it for the British in the past, because British migrated in a form that they were actually craving for labor and for farm labors, because these people were actually dwelling on land, invading on land. And the Xirikuana people, particularly the group, they were also in line into doing what? Into assisting them. That's why in history you find them, their legacy, it's consisting of what we know as your European legacy in a form. They have a flag today that when we read into the flag, you could see this is a colonial flag, right? And a colonial flag that is existing of families that is from the past, do you understand? And the flag that is also having a Dutch, similar to a Dutch flag, do you understand? So, in whatever gesture you would want to actually try to compose this from, Griqua people were a legacy of Europeans. That's why all Griqua towns, they're named after particularly different family, white families, like Philippolis, make an example. Philippolis, it is a land that used to be a land of indigenous people up until the missionaries arrived and chased indigenous people away. And when they chased them away, then that's when the Reverend Phillips got to own, was a mission was involved in a mission station in that area. And that's when they did what? That's when they got hold of the land, and they used, in a form that I say, they used labor in a form whenever they recruited indigenous women. Some of the indigenous women who were war victims, they took them in and they made them their wives in the past. So that's why they are on strongholds that some today, even your European historians as well, they are also consistently fueling this type of lies to say that the Griqua people were this, they were that, they were indigent. They were never indigent, and they were never had any legacy, even in any culture that is concerning the indigenous people. They were not part and parcel concerning that as well. Now I'm gonna come to the Cook family actually. I'm gonna come to all these families. Where are they derived from? Now, in a sense, if I can mention where it's concerned regarding the Phillips missioner actually in the past, he was involved in a mission that was destroyed. The sole purpose was to work hand in hand with the British Army and work hand in hand with what? With slave recruiters. And these recruiters were doing a hell of a job. Now, in the past, there was no free state in a say, but because of when British arrived, they also had land which they seized. And when they seized land, that's when each and every slave recruiter was engaged into being rewarded with land. And they also contributed into having commissions when they were doing so that that commission was having a right to give people who were illegit land. And that's why today we are surviving with the legacy of what we are survived with in terms of land. Do you understand? Now let's come to the Cook family. It's said that Adam Cook was a former slave as well when you read into the history. But nevertheless, they knew that Adam Cook only came to existence when the British people arrived. Adam Cook the first was never. There's no evidence that signing him to anything besides him being a slaver, and he was actually not working contrary to South Africa, but he was also part of people assigned to work from where it's been deemed to be West Africa. He was actually a slave recruiter. He also was engaged. He was involved in all slave recruitment engagements in the past, and he was also brought to South Africa. And he particularly worked for. He was a mercenary for white men who invaded land. He He was working for them, the first Adam Kok. And when he was from where he was coming from, he was also assisting and assigned that if ever it happened that they succeed seizing land and succeed in taking over partially, in taking people and people for cheap labor for farms, and taking people, selling them from human trafficking in a way, then those people will be taken forth and they will be given land as a reward because of honoring what the Europeans, I mean, the British standards of late invasion that was actually manifesting at that particular time. So, yes, Adam Kok was a slave. He was never a slave. There is no way that he was a slave. There's no evidence. And in the commissions that I've read, there was a lawyer that was representing him, Anot. Anot was also a mix, would say was Creole as well, in terms of he was a hybrid of mixture, and he was a lawyer. And being a lawyer, he was representing all Xirikuana families, all these groups of men, actually, that were brought forward under this entity of Griqua. You understand? And him, particularly, and primarily him, when on documents that were referred, especially on commissions that were taking place on the what was actually revered to be a Griqua land west in the past, those landscapes particularly were not owned by the Griquas. They were going on court to claim land that was never theirs, to claim landscapes that they were never, because they were using commissions in the past, and in particularly in those as well. Giving credit to the commissions as well. Adam Cook's name, actually, when it appears on the commission, it is not Adam Cook or Adam Cook, but it says it's Dam Iok. So it's strange, from being, when it's been registered as Dam Iok, it becomes Adam Cook, right? And Dam Iok, it seems to be a name that is not of an English origin, that is not of any indigenous background of a sort. Because when you say Dam Iok, it could signify that it comes from another language, right? That was his name. And for years, I've been trying to actually decipher and to look into the roots, actually, what does this name mean? Because there's nothing attached to it when it comes to any indigenous. The first Adam Kok that I'm referring to, nothing else that actually that is connecting the name particularly into primarily to the person being indigenous in South Africa as well. Now, that's why today, because of his work, his prominence in terms of slave raiding as well, that's why he earned land, because he was doing it frequently and he was serving white masters and all other your so-called heroes, especially your non-queer heroes that have been revered by the white historians that established territories. They also earned land. And that's why we have Kokstad today in Natal. And it was very strange because Kokstad, as it was, even if it was for the descendants of him actually that earned it, but it was because of the first Adam Kok that Kokstad existed. Because from what is known as Natal today, in the past, they used to have Natal adventurers. There were also slave raiders in the past. And it was comprised with people such as Francis Finn and all. And these were your British people who came in and they invaded land. They also were armed. They were also slave raiding in the past. And they slave raid along many communities. And they were selling slaves, especially in recruiting them to what is Delagua Bay or what is Maputo today. So I was given also a narrative about that as well, that it's very strange because enemy of these people, they gave that these people should settle there because knowing that these people were working for them, because the Natal adventurers and all, they were all aligned with the British mission for them to have farms and to also recruit and take people for cheap labor. Now, let's come to the Waterboers as well. With my knowledge with Waterboers is that Waterboers were a family of, I would say they were indigenous people who were bringing water during the war when the British were struggling and they were fighting with indigenous people. And this family particularly was providing water to the British. I wouldn't say the British, but the Boers or your first trackers in the past. They were providing particularly water for these people. So that was the reason that they earned the name Waterboer Mense. That's how they became Waterboer. Do you understand? And they were actually were savers because they were actually engaging on water assistance because people were thirsty in especially in the Karo area as well, in your Karoo area, which is your Karoo in the past. So Karoo meaning it is a place, a hard place. So they were known to be also assisting them in those engagements, and that's why we have a family that was known as Waterboer. Waterboers and Yokok family, they are not related. Leadership in terms of how they were writing leadership for the Xirikuana or this entity that was, it was never meant to be having a superior leadership. It was an agreement that was with the missionaries, with all the societies that were also engaged with this slave raiding mission, that were also assigned to be congregated together and to serve for whatever they did. And then thereafter, when the mission was achieved, then they continued to have relations. Griqua never had leadership as much as in Kwe leadership or indigenous leadership, if I may say, because they use European titles as captains. In Kwe culture, we don't use that, and it was never. We don't use captain. It's white missionaries that also, when they met a Gaukaup and Hukaup, they would refer them as captains. And in our culture, we don't know what captain is. Captain titles exist proportionally within the Griqua people in the past as well. So they're the ones with captain titles, and captain titles are European titles. They are not indigenous titles. If ever these people were indigenous, they would have never used captain titles, but they would have used indigenous titles as well. No shadow of a doubt, yes, some of these men, they knew how to speak the indigenous language, but it does not create a dialogue that these people were indigenous. That it does not, because even your non-Kwe in the past, they used to speak indigenous language, even though they have maintained their own language as well, languages in the past. And that I want to also distort this perception that when these families in the past that grew to have a legacy of a land that was stolen, more or less, especially when you go to Griqua town. Griqua town, known as Karakama, was land that was never composed by any Griquas because it was stolen by the British missionaries, by the British and the missionaries in the past. That was why it was known as Griqua town. They went and penetrated, they expelled powerful tribes that were of your indigenous state and that were actually more resistful when it comes to white supremacy in the past. That was trying to coerce itself, but finding on to be very complex because there were tribes that was actually cohesively, that was actually the resisting that much. And then I want to come to the ordeal of the Bloem. John Bloem and his generation were not Griquas. They were Griqua in description, but they were never Griqua in identity. In fact, the first John Bloem was white man who was actually against white supremacy, who was actually against the white invasion, especially the British invasion. Even your Boers, your four trackers as well, he was against that. And the history that we have about him, he was serving the Xirikuana, in the past. And when I say kingdom of your Korana people per se, he was received by the Daibosh in the past. And he was chosen to be a part for the Gats in the past. One reason, because militantly in the past, the Gats were they were very military prowess as well. So they were all aligned in one region. Do you understand? When you say Gats, I'm speaking of your Griqua or your na. Also, when I speak of a Daibosh, I speak of your Qina or Qmqua. Yeah, right? These are your raising berry people. You understand? This is what I'm actually referring to. So when he was a part of the society, and then he was accepted by the Waklikua, meaning your warrior state, your soldiers or warriors, he became part of a society where they taught Kora society how to write things, how to write as Tukana wrote, in behave in aiming to understand, to unlock, and to give perception as how Tukana in the past did things. Actually, it was a form of teaching them in a way to spy, to say, you know what, this is how this group of race or group of people behave, right? They use a pen, try to record your stuff. This is how he brought that. Do you understand? He had channels, and he brought that, to the society as well. That was never comprised of the Griqua. So, in a nutshell, he in the past as well, he was also involved with training Kora people to use guns, because they were using traditional weapons as much as cohesively they were. So he was teaching them how to use guns against people who were oppressing them, which was your white people in particular. And when he arrived in that moment, he trained them, all of your Kora society or Tuhasikwa, they were involved with guns, and in that way they were able to resist themselves with weapons. That's why white people, especially your British, when revering the history with your Korakona particularly, they say that these people were treacherous in terms of when they use guns, they're used to stealing farms and stuff. Do you understand? But in particularly, they were defending their territory and their wealth and their livestock. They were very hostile towards white people. That's why John Bloom, Kora people in the past, when they captured you, they never killed you. They killed you on war, but children and women, they never harmed children and women. They would rather absorb children and women of that group. And then if they see that the group was very harmless, they would allow them to live. But they would never invade them and make them theirs. At the part that they would take what's theirs, and then they will have to fend without whatever, unless there will be a treaty of a sort that will be drawn into that. They will never as being revered as being people who were very cruel. But when it comes to white people, they were very cruel. So John Bloom saw this in a different way. So he did what? He murdered a lot of white men in the past. He did. That's why we have a town that is named after him, which is Bloemhof in current Northwest Province in the past. But in the past, it used to be Free State as well. So him as well, because he was serving the Kora then it's not known which is John Bloom, the second or the first, but the first John Bloom, he hanged them in a tree. He used to hang all white people, not your non-Kwe. He would, even including these Xirikuas that were working against white men. I mean, with white men, not against, with white men. All these mercenaries as well. He would kill. That was his justice system. And that heritage as well, it still exists to this day. He used to hang them. Do you understand? Because Kora warriors in the past, they would engage in war with these people, and they would kill them in war. But in terms of them, they would rather not engage with them particularly. When John Bloom the first, when the first wife, who was a cat woman, right? Otuak passed on. He then went to the Kamkwana, lived with the Kamkwana, and then that's when he became part of the what? The Kodiqis, your Springboks. The Kodiqis are Daibosh coming from your Kabakwe or Kabakwena or Kabakis, which is your red people. An ancestor who was from the Daibosh, was known as the family name is known as Van Rooyen in Afrikaans. It is Van Rooyen, but in a so-called black hegemony, these people are known as Kaba people. Do you understand? But we say Kaba in terms of language because they are survived as what they're coming from. Ancestor was owning red cattle in the past. He was praised as Khabab. So the Springboks are a legacy to that from Khorib or Khudib or Khulib, who was what? Who was a chief, particularly, and the Springboks were known named after him in the past. So Jan Bloom, the first, he started his progenihood with the Bloom family within the Kodiqis. He was not a Griqua, even if it was the first or the second, but was not a Griqua. They were your Kora people. They were serving Kora king, your Qonghib at that time, right? Your Qonghib soup. They were saving him because he was the king in that era. So he was saving those people, but not saving any of your Xirikuana cult, because they were also part of the cult of stealing and murdering people for profit as well. Queer men were murdered or they were taken to slave. That's why you find that our people had been working on farms. It was because of the Xirikuas. That's how they evolved. They evolved within them, existed particularly. But then, to be quite frank with you, it was all because of them. But in that narrative, as I'm saying, Xirikuas were involved with that as well. But concerning people who are known as Krausuk in the Free State, giving narrative about those people, these people were never Griqua. Krausuk, they're your Cham people, the Nhung people particularly, because Nhung people were found in what is today Lesotho, Free State, even the Northern Cape as well. These people are known as homestead people. These are your Cham people, right? Ngongo in Xhosa, they say that they're among Ngongo in Xhosa. Find them in the Tembu, you understand? Because the Tembu people as well, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, they're your Cham society, do you understand? So Ngongo or Nhung people, your homestead people, that's why we say Nhung, Nklung. In Sotho they will corrupt it as Nklung, Nklu. Nklu, it means what? It means a house or home or family. Even in Xhosa, they say Indlu, Ndlu. It's Ngu actually, it's meaning a house. But when we say Nhung, or Nhung, it means a family, it's a tribe, it's a clan or tribe, in whatever circumstances you want to associate with. These people are not Xirikuana. It's those in the Free State that associate with Xirikua, but in the actual fact, they are not Xirikua at all. So I just wanted to make people aware. Xirikua does not serve any justice system in the past, because I used to have documents in the past that I read about Xirikua, who Xirikua were. They never associated, even on their own, they're saying that they were indigent. But today, they want to be indigent on false notion, because they believe that what the Gaukop, which is your government of today, that is using them to are ikweliwe umma kha qehat awduhu wana hesu was akunqurena khanqamaq ay xanu qamakuwa